Yes, 2-5 is here. Sports Reports is ordered. Don't forget to check out Mr. Logical and myself tomorrow night as we break down the picks for this weekend. NFL, college. We got some NBA awards to hand out, preseason awards. But do me a favor out there. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate. Do all the free things. Do all the good things. So tonight, got a few things I want to hit before we get out of here. Starting it off with the state of Pennsylvania. Got a big one going on in the Coliseum this weekend. James Franklin leading the Nittany Lions in to take on the Trojans, or Trojangeles, as I like to call them. Now, why is this game big to me? It's not even about the fact that Penn State is number 4 in the nation currently. It's not about the fact that USC beat LSU. It's not about the game that USC blew at Michigan. This is one of those games where it defines you as a program. Because when you look at Penn State, James Franklin has been there 10 years now. He took over in 2014, came in from Vanderbilt, where he led them to 3 straight bowl games, where they had never even made consecutive bowl games in their history prior. He was on staff at Maryland, my home Terps, and he was supposed to be the coach in waiting, under the fridge, Ralph Friedgen. It didn't quite work out, though, so he ended up at Penn State. And over the course of that time at Penn State has played in 8 bowl games. He took over after a tumultuous period, the Sandusky stuff, Bill O'Brien. He took over after all of that sanctions, but to date, Penn State under his leadership, 3-17 against top 10 teams. 4-16 against Ohio State and Michigan. And out of those 4, only 1 is against Ohio State. 1-9 against Ohio State. 8 bowl games. They're 4-4. Wins over Utah, BC, Washington in the 53-39 thriller over the Memphis Tigers. Losses, USC, Kentucky, Arkansas, and Ole Miss last year. So if you go back and look at it, what does that tell you? 0-3 against the SEC. So you're not beating top 10 teams. You can't hang with the SEC, and Michigan and Ohio State are punking you all around the conference. Now, why does that matter to me? Because you would say 2-5. Most teams can't beat Ohio State or Michigan. And you know what? You might be right. But the problem is there's not many schools that are peers or consider themselves to be peers to Ohio State and Michigan, right? You got your Notre Dames, your Alabamas, your Oklahomas, Texases, so on and so forth. But we're talking about in the Big Ten. Penn State was one of the schools that put college football on the map. And as I always say, 49ers and Cowboys, right? 49ers won the Super Bowl in 94, Cowboys in 95. Neither have won it since. Penn State won their last national title in 87, Notre Dame in 88. I don't count 1994. That was a shared championship with Nebraska. And everybody knows that Nebraska was the better team that year. But that's just the system that we were under. So as we look at this, the problem wouldn't be if Penn State was just losing these games. They're getting dominated by Michigan and Ohio State. So when I look at USC, this is an opportunity to stamp and say, this year is different. So I don't want Penn State to just win. I don't want Penn State to go into the Coliseum and walk out 27-24. I want Penn State to go into the Coliseum and walk out 34-14 and let USC know you are not on our level. You just lost to Minnesota last week, and I'm going to put the stake in your heart. Right? And when you look at this, you look at the rest of the schedule. Penn State, after this week against USC, bye week, and then they go to Camp Randall. You better not lose there. You better not lose in Camp Randall, even though I know it's a tough place to play. We saw what Alabama did there a few weeks ago. Then you come home. I said home, Happy Valley. The Buckeyes are coming in at your place. And depending on what happens this weekend, they're going to be fighting for their season. I got Oregon knocking off Ohio State this weekend. If that holds true, then Ohio State's coming to your house needing to beat you just to still have hopes for the Big Ten title game. Because if you handle your business, you will be there. We know the year that you went, 10-2, beat Ohio State, but couldn't get in the playoff, 14 playoff, because you had 2 losses. But then after the Ohio State game, they got UW coming in. They go out to Ross Aid to play Purdue. They go to Minneapolis where USC just lost. And then they close out with the Terps. So Penn State, this is the statement this weekend. This is your last shot to make us believe that you belong on the same field as Ohio State in a couple of weeks. Yes, I know you play Wisconsin, like I just mentioned before the Ohio State game. But this is the game that matters. USC is coming off a loss. Put them in the ground where they belong. James Franklin, his name has been rumored potentially for the Florida job if it comes open. I'm just saying, I don't make this stuff up. This is stuff that's out here in these streets. So I need you to do your job if you're going to end up with a job like that. I need you to take the talent that you have. You did the right hire. You brought in Andrew Kodanicki from out of Kansas. And we see what Kansas has fallen to. Not that their offense has fallen to the ground, but they're 1-5 right now. But he put Kansas on the map. Devin Neal. That's why we know his name, because of Andrew Kodanicki. So I would still like to see Drew Aller throw the ball down the field a little bit more, get a little bit more vertical. Still a lot of dink and dunk, a lot of slants, a lot of crossing routes, not going downfield. I need to see that, especially when you got a backfield like Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. There should be ample opportunity for play action and going above the defense's head. Just watching the game here. San Francisco's up 16-0 on Seattle. Seattle tried to go for the touchdown with 3 seconds left in the half. So it looks like we're going to get a field goal attempt here. So, Penn State, favored at USC. You got to get it done. Simple as that. So then, Friday night in the desert, the Utah Utes on their way out to Tempe to get some of the Sun Devils. Now, we just got word earlier today that Cam Rising is actually playing. For the last few weeks, he's been out with a hand injury. We went back to last year where every week you would get the fans' hopes up. Cam Rising could play. He's questionable, but then he never played. So the last 2 games he hasn't played. Utah went out, or 3 games, they went out and beat Utah State. They came back and beat Oklahoma State. And then, of course, they lost the home game, which they never do. They lost to Arizona. So Utah, I picked to win the Big 12 over Kansas State. So they cannot lose this game. They already a game in the hole in the conference. You got Colorado already undefeated, who plays Kansas State this weekend. You got Texas Tech undefeated, just coming off the win against Arizona, and they beat Arizona State a couple of weeks ago. So, you got West Virginia and Iowa State in a big one this weekend. So margin of error, razor thin, even though we all know that the Big 12 champion is probably going to have multiple losses. But I don't think you should lose this game, because Arizona State was my surprise team of the Big 12 season. I had them as a bowl team, winning 7 games. Here they are at 4-1, came down here to San Marcos a few weeks ago, had a big win against Texas State. And I know that sounds funny, a big win versus Texas State. But considering what Arizona State was last year, that was a big win, especially when you consider that Utah knocked them off 55-3 last year, Pac-12 matchup. So with Cam Rising back, Utah is feeling confident. They got their quarterback back. They have their leader back. Arizona State, on the other hand, with their freshman quarterback, Sam Levitt, it's been a kind of a roller coaster, up and down. He has a couple of 200-yard passing games, but only 59% completion percentage. Cam Scatbo is where it's at. 5.5 yards per carry, one of the leading running backs in the Big 12. So Arizona State is a trendy pick to pull this upset. Part of that was when everybody thought that Cam Rising wasn't going to play. But now that Cam Rising is playing, we're going to take the Utes. I'm going to take Arizona State to cover. I saw it at 6.5. I'm going to take the Utes to cover, and I'm going to call it 27-23. And then also Friday night, you got College Park, Maryland, 20 minutes from where I grew up. You got Northwestern coming in. This game is important from the standpoint of who wants to make a bowl. Maryland is coming in off of 3 straight 8-5 seasons, but the tenor of their seasons have been, let's start 5-0, 6-0, 5-1, and then we lose to everybody. Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State on the schedule. But this year, you only got Penn State on the schedule out of that threesome, if you will. But you also got Iowa, USC next week. You go to Oregon, and you close with Penn State. So it's not exactly like your schedule is easy. So you need to win this game against Northwestern. Northwestern is not a very good team. We are 2 weeks removed from them scoring 5 points against Washington. 5 points, and I'm not talking about a baseball game, right? So then both of these teams are both 0-2 in the Big Ten. They're both coming off of losses to Indiana. So this is a get-right spot for Maryland. Dante Trader should be back. Caden Prather should be back. Ty Felton should be back, the leader in receptions and yards in the Big Ten. Northwestern will be able to run the ball on Maryland, though. Maryland doesn't have that great of a run defense. But I wonder as well, depending on how this season ends up, is Coach Mike Locksley in trouble for being fired? I think that's a possibility. You've been 8-5 the last 3 years. I talked about the falls at the end of the season. So if you come out and finish, say, 5-7 this year, at the very least, you're on the hot seat next year. So that's why games like this matter, because to show progress and to show that you're on the right path, you have to beat the teams that you're supposed to beat. Northwestern is a team that you're supposed to beat. Last year, they were the feel-good story. Coach Fitzgerald got fired. In comes David Braun. They go 8-5, beat the Utes in a bowl game. This year, totally different Northwestern team. They lost at home to Duke in overtime. They struggled with Miami of Ohio, 13-6 final score. So last year, somehow they beat you 33-27 when everybody's asking the $1 million question. How the hell did Northwestern score 33 points? So I'm picking the Terps in this one. 10.5-point spread. I am going to take Northwestern to cover, though. Barely. So I'm going to call this one 28-20. Now, of course, this weekend is the big weekend in college football. The big matchups all over the place. Ohio State, Oregon, the big Red River shootout. We don't call it the other thing around here. It's always going to be the shootout. You even got your regular matchups like Tennessee and Florida. Florida, by the way, 17-2 last 19 games against the Vols. Underdogs by 16.5. I'm taking the Gators to cover, but keep your eye on that game because Nico is another one of these guys that we crowned too early. Like last year, if we go back and look at Jackson Arnold, we sat there and talked about how he was the future of Oklahoma. Dylan Gabriel was lucky to keep his job because Jackson Arnold is on his heels. So I went to the Alamo Bowl, watched Jackson Arnold against Arizona. And granted, it was his first true start, but I just didn't see it. I was like, what are we looking at here? This decision-making is awful. And I'm just not impressed in the first place. So when you look at Nico, for example, last week, his claim to fame, 4th and 1 with the game on the line. He runs out of bounds. His time expired. It's his first year starting. I don't want to bang on the kid, but before the season started, I said that Tennessee's not going to make the playoff because people were just throwing flowers at Nico's feet and just thinking that he's the answer. He might be, just not this year. You got Florida tomorrow or Saturday. You got Alabama next week. Alabama that has already lost a game looking for blood, and trying to keep their playoff hopes alive. You still got Georgia. So you're not anywhere out of the woods just yet. And, oh, by the way, you lost to Arkansas, another school besides Florida who's looking at potentially firing their coach. You might have saved his job. So college football, y'all, greatest sport in the world. It's my favorite time of the year. You know what I'm saying? So I'll see you back tomorrow. Have a good night. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate, do all the free things. Do all the good things. Peace.